gentlemen, at this time, it is my awesome pleasure to introduce to you the Commanding General of the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force, Lieutenant General Robert Headland.
Yeah, he's just saying I'm hired up. That my job tonight is to really introduce our guest of honor, and it is truly an honor. But I want to thank, first of all, before we get started, I'm not going to go through the enormous list that General Faulkner had to go through on who all is here, because I think it's representative of how important this event is, how important it is to have an event like this for the MCANF, because their support to Marines in the field, in the barracks, in the headquarters, in their units is enormous. And whether it's the Commandant's reading list library, or whether it's supporting them via an awards program, which is second to none. And I think next month is another example of the awards program supported, sponsored, and really run by the MCAF. I want to give them, for those who set this up, provided a wonderful evening for us, a round of applause. So to the foundation and the association. And, since the industry partners are popping up on the computer, I probably need to say something about that as well. And it cannot be done, as Mark said, without a partnership between the private and public sector. And so their commitment to us, down to the individual community level. So whether you're an industry partner from the DC area, globally, in fact, down to places like Havelock and Jacksonville, Swansboro, etc., all the local folks who have been out to support us tonight and throughout the year. I want to thank you as well for your support tonight. So a round of applause for all the industry sponsors. So tonight, for all the distinguished visitors that are here tonight, thank you for coming. But tonight, my job is to introduce our guest speaker and allow him to have his time with us, which I know will be beneficial for all of us. So our guest speaker tonight is Honorable Thomas B. Modley. He is the 33rd Under-Secretary of the Navy. So for those who are not steeped in Pentagonese, the Under, as we affectionately call the Under-Secretary of the Navy, is like the XO of the Department of the Navy. Okay, so if you're in 1-2, or if you're in 2-6, or if you're, the XO. So nothing in his inbox is easy. Okay, as you'll hear in a moment, you don't. I have scar tissue from being the Secretary of the Navy's. He's helping me with my loud voice or my soft voice. I'm not sure which it is. Good. Okay. So as the Marine aide and the senior military assistant to the Secretary of the Navy, I know the Under is a busy guy. And so it is wonderful that we have him here with us tonight. And Secretary Modley is serving, as I said, the 33rd version of that. But he also has a couple other hats that he wears, some of which he helped the Secretary build from scratch. And that is the Chief Management Officer and the Chief Information Officer for the Department of the Navy. I can say that I joined the Secretary as a distinguished graduate of the class of 1983. Although he went to the Naval Academy, I didn't go to the Naval Academy. He is also a rotary wing aviator. I joined him in that wonderful group of individuals who are unrestricted aviators in the naval aviation regime. He was a UH-1N pilot, a CH-46 pilot. Again, we share that bond that we are naval aviators from aircraft that are long since retired. The point at which we diverge is his impressive educational background. So, as United States Naval Academy graduate with distinction, he has a master's degree from Georgetown University and a master's degree also from the Harvard Business School. I have a Bachelor of Arts degree in criminal justice from the Florida Atlantic University. Go Owls! And I have two masters, one from Marine Corps Command Staff College, and one from almost Air War College, Montgomery, Maxwell Air Force Base, Montgomery, Alabama. So at that point, you know, all kidding aside, we have his impressive educational background, but also an impressive career credentials from an individual who has served both in the public and the private sector equally admirably. From PricewaterhouseCoopers to the Deputy Under Secretary of Defense for Financial Management, and over a decade of experience in corporate strategy, mergers, and acquisition in the IT and aviation field. The Under, as I mentioned, has that background in the education, but also that background career-wise, to come into the Department of the Navy and make change happen. And when I talk about change happening, we're talking about increasing the Don's business ops savvy, so business operations, processes, practices, improving those, as well as our agility, accountability, which we're all very interested in as taxpayers, and certainly, and most importantly, increasing warfighting support to Marines and sailors around the world, both in garrison and deployed. So it is my great honor, and I would like for all of you to join me in a warm welcome to Secretary Thomas Mosley, the Secretary of Defense.
Okay, thanks so much, Joe. Appreciate the introduction. I don't really know where to go from that one, but I'm not sure being called the XO is a compliment all the time. Interesting story. This year I had the ability to convince the Secretary of the Navy to name one of our new warships, one of our new LCSs, after my hometown, which is Cleveland. Anyone from Cleveland here? Yes. All right. That's good. That's good to know. My middle age is always amazed like how many people from Cleveland we meet everywhere we go. But we named this warship the USS Cleveland, and as part of the process, we got to go to a couple of commissionings, and I got to meet Admiral Winnefeld. And he told me he had been the CEO of the last USS Cleveland, which is an LPD. And he told me this story about when he was the CEO of the USS Cleveland. They were out steaming around somewhere in the Med or the Atlantic or something, and they had a bunch of other ships with them. One of them was a destroyer, and on that destroyer, they had a couple of midshipmen on the destroyer who were from the city of Cleveland. And so they asked if they could come over to the USS Cleveland and spend some time on the ship. And the ship had a flag, their battle flag was Chief Wahoo. You guys know who Chief Wahoo is? You know, he's the enigmatic emblem of the Indians until last year when they succumbed to political pressure and got rid of them. But I think what you're going to see in Cleveland is more people wearing old vintage Cleveland Chief Wahoos in protest of that. But anyway, there was this big flag. So the midshipmen come over, they spend the afternoon, they helicopter them over there, they spend the afternoon, and when they're done, they're steaming around, and it was time for the ships to hoist their battle flags, and the Cleveland's looking around, they can't find Chief Wahoo anywhere. He's missing. So they look over, and the destroyer's steaming in formation next to them is flying the USS Cleveland, flying the Chief Wahoo flag from the USS Cleveland on the mast. So this, of course, incensed the commanding officer of the Cleveland, is Admiral Winnefeld, then Captain Winnefeld. So he sent a SEAL team over there to try and capture and get the flag back. So he gets back over to the ship, and they can't find the flag anywhere. So they kidnap the XO. They put the plastic ties on him. They bring him over to the ship, and they send a message over to the destroyer that says, "We have your XO. Please return. You need to return right now, Chief Wahoo, to the USS Cleveland." And the message comes back, "We don't really like the XO." So just hang on to shoot water. So that's my XO story this evening. Thank you so much for having me here. It's really a pleasure for me to be here. I had the opportunity to speak at the Marine Corps Aviation Association dinner in Washington, D.C. a couple months ago. And before the dinner, Bob Lomas, my very able chief of staff, said, yeah, you know, they do these dinners like once a month. And I was like, wow, once a month? Like, how far do they have to scrape down the bottom of the barrel till I get meat, you know, to come to this thing? So tonight I find out you guys do these 15 times a year. So you really are scraping to get people here. So I'm glad I could fill this seat here tonight. So good evening, and Lieutenant General Hedgeland, thank you so much for the invitation. Lieutenant General Faulkner, really enjoyed speaking with you and your wife tonight. And Sergeant Major Fresher, Brigadier General Watson, Sergeant Major Metzger, congratulations and thanks for having me here. It's an honor here to join you here in Carolina as part of the Carolina MAGTAP. It's just a thrill for me to be here, and actually, you know, everyone's thanking me for being here. I was like, gosh, anytime. Why don't you guys invite me up earlier in the day so I could get out of Washington, D.C., because it's really not that fun there all the time. So anyway, but it's great to be back here in Eastern North Carolina. As a child, my family and I used to vacation near here, actually on Emerald Island, which I'm sure many of you have been to, Emerald Island. It's not too far from here. And I remember vividly, actually, Marine A4s and A6s sort of flying over the beach on their way to the outlying field there at Bogue Banks. And I just remember seeing that and just being captivated by that and wondering who was flying those and what they were doing and what their lives have been like, how they got to that point in their careers. So it was always fascinating to me. We always just loved coming here. And I remember vividly standing on the beach one time and looking across that vast ocean, because it goes all the way across the ocean to Europe. And standing there with my father, who a couple decades before that, in the late 1940s, early 1950s, had escaped from behind the Iron Curtain. And he made his way across that ocean to start a new life here in the United States, free of tyranny, full of opportunity, and really blessed with neighbors in the United States who welcomed him, despite his funny accent and his very unusual name. It was a life he knew he would be able to live because of the sacrifices of the United States Armed Forces. Sacrifices that began by the United States Navy in those very dark, cold, and treacherous waters of the Atlantic Ocean, and by our sailors, Marines, soldiers, and airmen on the beaches of Italy and northern France, and across that continent of Europe until they arrived on his border there in Hungary. That supreme effort, that liberation of millions of people, has been the crowning and defining achievement of this nation. And when you sit on those Carolina beaches and you bask in the serenity that they provide, and you imagine all the horrors that our countrymen endured on the other side of that same ocean, so that we, in this generation, and in other future generations, could have such moments of peace and beauty, it's really beyond humbling. So I challenge you, next time you go there, just think about that. It's really an amazing thing to think about, because it's just this big body of water that separates us from that. And I can't overemphasize the importance of events like tonight's dinner for the camaraderie and professional development it does for you as a Marine Corps family. So let's just take a moment not to thank the sponsors, the Marine Corps Association and Foundation, but also all those who toiled behind the scenes to make this event happen. So thank you very much for that. And then to the Marine Corps MCF, thanks also for everything you do all year, every single year, to serve as a professional association of the Marine Corps. I was talking to the General today about the parallels between this and USNI, and all you do, the tremendous amount of good works you do, and through your 4 foundational pillars and programs, to include the most relevant one to me, which is the Commandant's Professional Library Program. Part of that professional library is now starting to be populated in my office, because I asked my staff to assemble a library of key books that I can pass on to my successors in this job, which could happen next month or years. So we're working really hard to get that thing filled out. But thanks to my chief of staff, Bob Love over there, who's a retired Marine colonel and an expert logistician and a proud member of this association, I'm noticing that there's a heavy preponderance of Marine books starting to fill that collection since he arrived on the scene, which is a good thing. So now, since the Marines have relinquished the fort to the Navy guy for the evening, and I know that's a very, very hard thing to do for Marines, because I'm the last speaker, and because it's after dinner, and I also know the clock is ticking, and I only have a short amount of time to get across a few key messages. So allow me to prioritize a little bit and address the most important audience first. This is to the spouses and the families of the Carolina MAGTF. Thank you so much for your service to the country. We all know you don't always get the medals and the accolades that deserve to come your way. And this past year, in this area, it's been especially tough. Your families have had to endure the devastating effects of Hurricane Florence, a storm and flood of biblical proportions for this area, and an incredible hardship for so many people here. Yet your resilience, dedication, and commitment to moving forward, despite these difficult circumstances, has really been remarkable. I know that my wife Robin wishes she could be here tonight to talk to some of you as she travels with me and she enjoys being with the families and discussing some of the challenges that they have. Our own active duty career in the Navy was really, really short because we met just a few days after my last final flight in the UH-1 when I was assigned to the USS Nassau. After that, we did a shore tour and I was out. So we never really experienced those long absences that many of you have. And although I'm pretty sure Robin may have wished for a couple of really long deployments from me on occasion over the last 30 years, maybe even one right now, I don't mean to drag you into that, but please understand your sacrifice is really noticed and it's appreciated. And I'm positive we could not have this incredible Marine Corps without you. So thank you for that. As you may know, I have a special kinship and connection with the Marine Corps. My first helicopter flight instructor was a Marine. He taught me how to fly and to curse with great creativity. My first senior pilot on the USS Nassau was also a Marine. He taught me something even more important than that: how to curse with high regularity and smile at the same time. But seriously, though, he was one who really taught me the most important lesson I learned as a young naval aviator, and that was how to fly with confidence. As leaders, this is something we should all strive to build in the people who work for us, to develop their confidence so that one day they can even exceed their own expectations. Those are the greatest and most rewarding aspects of leadership, and it has become obvious to me that the Marine Corps, maybe more than any other service, has understood this throughout its entire history. My current boss, also, Secretary Spencer, is a Marine helicopter pilot, CH-46, who, like me, left active duty as an 03. So the moral of that story is, you better be nice to your junior officers, because you never know where they may end up. Also, my current Chief of Staff and my previous one, my current Chief of Staff, Bob Love, Colonel, previous one, Colonel Andy Heitley, some of you may know him as well, now working at the White House, are both retired Marine colonels. So while some things may change and promotions happen, some things do stay the same. I'm still just a Navy guy, being controlled by and trying to impress a bunch of Marines. And I'm not really sure how that's going, but I am trying my best. And thanks to those many Marine mentors as well, and thanks to those many Marine mentors and all of my experiences in the private sector and in government service for the last several years, I have been thinking a lot about a term that was mentioned earlier here today, and that is agility. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that. It's become a very, very popular term in describing organizational behavior, and what many believe, including me, is the key determinant of success in the highly competitive world in which we are currently living. I think it's going to have to be the characteristic that differentiates our armed forces from our competitors at the end of the day. And most importantly, it must be what defines the naval forces of the future that we're trying to build. But agility as a term on its own has never been very satisfying to me. It's very difficult to define it and to measure it, and it's hard to say with certainty what it is and what it looks like. And it reminds me of a Supreme Court case from like 1964 where they were dealing with obscenity and pornography. And Justice Stewart, who wrote the primary opinion on this, and trying to define what pornography is and what obscenity was, he said, I don't think it's that important that we actually have to define what it is. We pretty much know it when we see it. So I think the same way about agility. We're going to know it when we see it. And so I think there are some organizational characteristics that will give us clues into what we'd be looking for. So I've come up with 8. This is after years of thinking about it and talking to people, and I'm quite certain there could be more. And you probably could develop your own list. But these 8 qualities are pretty good ones to strive for. And plus, frankly, they're the only ones I came prepared to talk about tonight. So you're going to have to listen to these. Okay, the first one is velocity or speed. In a time of rapid change, organizations have to learn to do things faster. And so must we. Every major enterprise that has emerged as a leader in their respective industry over the last 20 years has improved in this area, and some by quantum leaps. For many of us old-timers here, those of us, generally you, several of us who were trained in the last century, when you started your careers, think about how long it took to shop for something in a catalog, or to book an airline ticket, or to have a package delivered. Think about how long it took to transfer money, or just to get cash to go out and spend. More significantly, think about how long it took for well-established institutions to lose their competitive advantages. Think about Kodak, or General Motors, or Sears and Roebuck, or even a more current example in the internet age, American Online, who we thought, wow, they had an incredible advantage, they were never going to go away, right? Once the tide and pace of change begins accelerating, it is impossible to stop it. So speed is going to be critical to survival in such an environment. For the Navy and Marine Corps, this speaks not only to how fast our weapons can fly, and how quickly we can move forces from place to place. And it means something to all those things, but it has much more importance with respect to how it characterizes our processes and how we think and how we make decisions. When we look at our acquisition programs, for example, I think we can all agree that our lack of speed when compared to commercial industry is costing us money and is stifling our ability to incorporate technologies at the velocity of change that we're experiencing. When compared to some of our geostrategic competitors who have discovered ways to shortcut innovation through nefarious means, also known as stealing and cheating, or who can more quickly leverage commercially available technology, our lack of speed is quickly becoming a competitive disadvantage, and so we have to get serious about how we fix that. In the end, if we don't correct this trajectory, it will end up costing us more than just money. The second one is adaptability. Agile organizations adapt quickly to changing conditions. They do not allow themselves to stagnate or be overcome by changes in their environment. The Boston Consulting Group studied this problem, and they studied something called corporate adaptiveness. And they discovered that there are, in fact, concrete ways to measure a company's capabilities in this regard. Not surprisingly, when examined within competitive environments that are defined by heavy turbulence, which I think we could say we're experiencing now, the most adaptive companies on the BCG index far outperform those who were lower on this adaptiveness scale. This does not happen by accident. Rather, those companies who successfully built adaptive cultures and organizations, they did it intentionally, and they invested in it commensurately. For us, this means we must continue to invest in adaptability across the entire Navy enterprise. We must foster flexibility in our people, design and construct both adaptable platforms and force deployment models, and ensure that both people and platforms are enabled by flexible business and operational processes, just as our people must be able to adapt to the multiple potential environments in which they may be asked to operate and to fight. They cannot afford to be ignorant of them, and neither can we. The third is innovation. Agile organizations are adept and comfortable with trying new things, with experimenting, failing, measuring, trying again, all with a view towards finding new solutions to the current and anticipated problems. And I will say in my year and a couple months on this job, I've seen a lot of that in the Marine Corps as I travel around. A heavy emphasis on innovation, looking at new ways to do things, and that's been extremely encouraging to me. And so for those of you who haven't read it and have an interest in understanding how breakthrough innovation and manned flight actually happen, in the last century. I commend to you this Wright Brothers biography that was written by David McCulloch. The Wright Brothers story is remarkable. It's really, really great history, but it's also a complete innovation case study. And how innovation is not reckless, but it's meticulous, and it's relentless. And even though this occurred over 100 years ago, Orville and Wilbur Wright demonstrated that innovation is driven by constant trial and error, meticulous documentation, and the deliberate construction of a culture of learning within their own little shop of 3 or 4 people. We need a learning culture like this in the Navy and Marine Corps. We must embrace this as a core value. As young authors wrote in the latest issue of the Gazette magazine, they talked about this. And as we think about innovation and its role in the future of our Navy and Marine Corps, no words seem more relevant than this. Rapid technological advances are driving the raw technical requirements for innovation, but knowledge is not defined by technical competencies. It's created through leadership that encourages innovation and risk-taking and inspires sailors and Marines who thirst to learn and excel in circumstances that are characterized by what we expect them to be characterized by: unpredictability and uncertainty, and by adversaries who we can't understand exactly what they're going to do next. The fourth is collaboration. Collaborative cultures may appear to be on the opposite end of the spectrum from bureaucratic ones. I have often observed in the Department of Defense, like most great bureaucracies, are what I would call self-siloing organizations. They tend to have an aversion to working across organizational boundaries and organizations and sub-organizations, and have a bias towards protecting themselves, along with their domains. Everyone understands what I'm talking about here, I'm sure. They try to protect their budgets, they try to protect their identities, they try to protect their hierarchies, and they fight for those things fiercely. Let me also say that most of this behavior is actually very well intentioned. I experienced this myself when I was in the Pentagon the last time, during my last tour in the department, and Bob was with me on this, and I call it the purple squishy ball syndrome. In the Q&A I'll explain that a little bit more, but when I took over the program, I found out this program office for the Business Management Modernization Program had spent not an insignificant amount of dollars on BMMP branded products. So they had lanyards branded, they had branded pens, they had BMMP branded notepads, and other items, including these little purple squishy balls that said BMMP on them. Nothing of that had anything to do with working across organizational boundaries, but rather sort of establishing their own legitimacy. So the entire program had organized itself around domains that mirrored the organizational silos that already existed in the department at the OSD level, and they collaborated just about as well. So we must demonstrate zero tolerance for organizational silos and an aversion to accumulation of power. And I know this is very antithetical to how we think, but we have to think this way, and building broader coalitions across our organizations. The fifth is visibility. This is a key supporting element of the previous 4 elements that I talked about, because as it exists in all organizations that move quickly, adapt, innovate, and share information freely, visibility is key, transparency is key. These organizations allow for the best authoritative data to be able to derive decisions, data that people can agree on, agreement on the facts so that decisions can be made quickly. So for us in the Navy and Marine Corps, this has much to do with the applicability to a theater of maritime operations as it does to the back office. The proliferation of platforms and sensors and our ability to integrate them and understand all the data that they produce will be critical to the success of the future warfighting capabilities. But the business systems and the business operations behind them have to have good data. We have to know where the money's going. But all this data has to make sense, and we must figure out how best to exploit visibility at the right level, to the right level, and at the right time so that we increase lethality. The same organizational value of visibility is critical to the business environment. And in this regard, I'll put it quite simply, we just simply need to know where our stuff is, and we need to know how much it costs, and we need to know how long it is going to take to get it where it needs to be. Today, I would say that I don't think everyone in our organization can answer any one of those questions with a high degree of confidence. In the future, lots of people are going to have to be able to do that. And I'll give you an example. We just completed our first financial audit. One of the things that they found in the financial audit, looking at inventory, is they discovered a warehouse in California that had $146 million worth of aircraft parts in it that we didn't even have in our system. No one even knew it existed. When we found it, we recognized it, we put it into the system. Within 2 weeks, $90 million worth of requisitions for parts out of that inventory for aircraft that have been down looking for those parts. Okay? That's why visibility is so critical. That's why the financial audit, despite its name, should never be confused or viewed solely as a financial-driven effort. It's an enterprise imperative because the corrections in visibility and accountability and overall behavior is going to accrue directly to the warfighters to hit on all the other things I talked about with respect to what agility is. So this is our audit. It's our audit as an enterprise. It's not just the comptrollers. And we're not going to be successful in the future or derive any benefits from it unless we all embrace it and embrace it fully. The sixth is humility. We have to become honest with ourselves about whatever deficiencies we may have. We know that at this moment we are the most lethal and powerful naval force in the world. There's no doubt about that. There's no Marine Corps like ours. There's no Navy that compares. But let me caution you, Kodak thought the same thing in their markets. So did GE. So did Blockbuster Video. So did AOL. So did any number of other companies who were leaders in their fields within the last 20 years, and who not only lost market share, but actually don't even exist anymore. It is a byproduct of rapid and disruptive change, and it doesn't just happen to businesses. We need to think like our competitors and look at our own weaknesses, be honest about them with clear and humble hearts so we can address them head on. The seventh is skepticism. And when I say skepticism, I don't mean cynicism. Skepticism means not accepting all things at face value, but challenging conventional thinking and rejecting incrementalism when more dramatic change is needed. I recently saw a great definition of this, and I think it really truly captures this characteristic, not as something negative, but truly as a virtue that people can have. Quote, "The true meaning of the word skepticism has nothing to do with doubt, disbelief, or negativity. Skepticism is the process of applying reason and critical thinking to determine validity. It's a process of finding a supported conclusion, not the justification of a preconceived conclusion." Okay, the last one, the eighth one, is trust. Fortunately, this is a characteristic we've done a fairly good job embedding in the Navy Marine Corps team and into our culture over time. We ask our junior personnel to trust and obey the orders of their superior enlisted and officer corps. It is well understood, but it can never be taken for granted, and it must also flow both ways, up and down the chain of command. For what we can say with certainty about the predictability of the future is that it will most likely be defined by unpredictability. In such an environment, a high degree of trust and the competence and professionalism of even the smallest of our fighting units, and even to the individual level, is going to be absolutely critical for success. We're going to need all 8 of these characteristics of agility, because changes are coming at us extremely fast. So we must be prepared to break free of some of those organizational paradigms and behaviors and biases that suited us pretty well in the last century in a Cold War environment. They're not well suited for today. And certainly they're not well suited for tomorrow and the rest of this century. Today, I believe we're truly approaching another historical inflection point of technological and social change, while at the same time within a security environment characterized by competitors who are more credibly challenging our military capabilities. It's a very dangerous confluence of events, and one we cannot spend our way out of. Rather, we have to think our way out of it. In this time and in this age, we have no choice but to strive for greater agility, to take risks, to apply America's most precious resource, our God-given talents, educated and groomed in the service of our nation, in order to assume the competitive advantage that will last. And the key to that advantage lies in the minds and the spirit of every single person in this room and all the people that you touch on a daily basis, and in one another. We should ask at every turn when developing the naval force of the future, how flexible and adaptable are our people and our platforms and our systems? How well do they collaborate and interoperate with allies and with unmanned assets or smaller combatants that don't fit neatly into defined categories? How fast are they? Not just on the ground or over and under the water, but in the information space. Or how quickly can they be reconfigured to address different threats? How transparent are they within a network of systems and platforms in which they operate? and how non-transparent and unpredictable are they to our adversaries? And a question which former Commandant of the Marine Corps Al Gray might well have asked, how innovative, quote, how innovative are the tactics they employ and the people who man the ships and devise these tactics? Let me conclude by giving you all a simple formula to think about as you contemplate what you yourself can help build this agile naval force of the future. I was recently debating with Commander Slough, now recently promoted Captain Slough. She's my military aide. I was talking to her about the value of some of the engineering courses that we had to take at the Naval Academy. And she's an engineer, and tough as nails, destroyer commander. But her argument was that certain formulas and theorems that we learned at the Academy were very valuable to her in helping her understand how things work. And in her case, to understanding the physics of what made her ship be able to fight. Well, I was a political science major, not an engineer, and I wasn't exactly a fan of all the engineering courses and science classes we had to take. But still, I appreciated all that I learned in this regard. And to this day, there are a few fundamental formulas that I remember. The most relevant of these to me in the context of my remarks and to what I'd like you all to think about and take home with you is this formula. F equals ma. Force equals mass times acceleration. So when I think about the naval force of the future, what it should be, I think this formula is highly relevant, with one significant modification. So suspend the laws of physics for a second. I apologize, Captain Slough, on this one. But substitute the A that we traditionally assign to acceleration and assign to acceleration the A, the term agility. That means naval force equals mass times agility. I think this is the formula we need to embrace in order to fully compete and win in this era of uncertainty and rapid change, an era in which we will continue to be challenged to retain our supremacy on the seas. So if agility is comprised of all those factors I described before, how are we to define what the M is in that formula? Should M be mass, as it traditionally is? And if so, is this mass to be measured by the size of our force when we face adversaries whose populations will far likely to exceed our own? Or is mass to be measured by the strength of our own weapons and information about the lethality of rockets and munitions and guidance systems and satellite systems and sensors and seekers, when all those things, all that data, all that information is becoming ubiquitous in the information age? I would argue that using the traditional definition of M for mass would probably not do the trick either. Our mass will only contribute to our competitive advantage as a naval force, as it always has for the Navy and Marine Corps team, through the strength of our minds and the magnitude of our hearts. This is why we must invest in our minds, foster education, and transform ourselves into a true learning organization. Our recent Education for Sea Power study emphasizes this point and is leading now to a complete reorganization and prioritization of education across the naval service. In the final report of this study, there is a prescient quote from Commandant Gray on the inside front cover, and it says, quote, "An officer's principal weapon is his mind. Thus, it will be so for all of our forces. It is our one remaining competitive advantage, and we must not allow that to be eroded." Finally, our mass is to be measured by the magnitude of our hearts. And that, Marines and Marine families, is to be found in the love you have for your country, for our Constitution, and for the men and women who serve with you in the armed forces. Love the people that you have the privilege to lead. Care about their families as much as yours. Positively and proactively address thoughts of suicide and addiction. Be vigilant to prevent sexual assault and harassment against them, as vigilant as you would be if it was one of your own sons and daughters. Make sure they are getting the housing they deserve. Care about their careers more than your own. Teach them, just as my Marine senior pilot on the NASA did for me, how to be confident in their abilities so that they too, at one point in their careers, can exceed their own expectations. If we do these things, if we commit ourselves to building an educated team, a team that is committed to each other and to the country, with deep and abiding love for each other and each other's families, a team that acts with all these elements of agility we can define. I am entirely convinced that we will know that force when we see it, and so will our enemies. And there is no possible way we will ever be defeated, and neither will the enduring principles of liberty upon which this country was built. Thank you for inviting me here this evening and for what you do every day to give hope to people around the world. Like my father, who lived far from our shores, but who longed for liberty, prosperity, and peace that only strength like ours can produce. Go Navy, Semper Fi, and of course, as always, beat Army. Good night.
Secretary, thank you. Just tremendous comments. Agility it's probably going to be in the next Gazette. So, and the 8 characteristics. So, thank you very much, and thank you for being here. Everything that's on your plate, and safe travels going back this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, what a great night. We appreciate everyone being here tonight. There's a lot behind putting together tonight's dinner. Certainly, your attendance is the most important aspect, but I just want to thank our Marine Corps Association and Foundation team. There's a lot of them in here, the folks that helped put this together, that made the trip down from Quantico. And I also want to thank General Hedlund and his commanders and his senior leaders from across 2MEF, as well as General Watson on the supporting establishment side. And certainly all the friends of the Marine Corps in the Carolina MAGTF in Eastern North Carolina. Thank you all very much. We had a great time, a great evening, topped off certainly by your comments, Mr. Secretary. Have a great evening tonight. Semper Fidelis, and God bless every one of you. Thank you.